Hello again, welcome to another update, and I'm pleased to say that I've got some good news. I've finally identified where the short circuit was on my ECOS. It did take me 2 full days to do it. When I posted the last video, I basically had 2 weeks doing nothing, just feeling sorry for myself, which is a bit silly. I got some great comments, some great ideas of things to try. One of the first things I thought was this is a new double slip, as I mentioned in a previous update. It's still got the point motor actuating rod sticking out. I haven't cut them off yet, and I thought, could it be that because it was the last change to the layout when I put a new double slip in? So one of the first things I looked at was that. Quite a few people said, have you took everything off the track as well, because you know they've had faulty rolling stock, or a locomotive's dropped a tiny screw or something, and that's caused problems before. Yeah, there was nothing on the track at all when I posted that video. So yeah, it was difficult to know where to start. Obviously, you divide the problem into blocks, and you start with the ECOS, because ECOS is the thing showing the fault. So I disconnected everything. With nothing connected, worked fine. Connected a short piece of track, ran a locomotive on it, worked fine, no problems at all. On the main and the programming, everything was okay. So it didn't look like it was the ECOS. So then that's when I started looking at everyone's ideas. One of the things Overdene Station suggested was that he said he uses cobalts as well, and basically you push fit wires into those little holes on the top there, and he says if you get a tiny piece of wire which you might overlook, especially if you're underneath the layout, like you see there, that's a one strand of wire that can easily touch and cause a short circuit. It might not happen straight away, but underneath the layout, if you move the wires, that's quite possible that it can cause a short circuit. So one of the things you should do is make sure that the wires are pushed fully home. Don't leave any bare wires sticking out of the top, and also make sure that you twist the wires and there's no strands like that. Don't tin the wires. DCC Concepts don't recommend tinning the wires. It's not really suitable for this type of connected tinned wires. Just twist them, make them short enough to fit totally inside, so there's no bare wire sticking out of the connector. So I did check all the point motors for that. So thanks Overdene Station. That is a good tip, I think. Coolbridge Junction said that he's split his layout into sections, and each section's isolatable with a double pole, double throw switch, which I thought a great idea, because basically if you divide it into small sections, you can just turn a section off at a time and see where the problem is, and that at least narrows it down to a section. So it wasn't the ECOS, and it wasn't the wiring to the point motors. That was all nice and neat. So basically you've got to start the process of electrical fault finding, and 3 of my subscribers basically said the same thing. Minoc 1217, Gary McPherson and Andy Gibson, that you find a midpoint of the wiring and you cut it. Then if the first part works, it's obviously in the second part, so then you take the second part and you find a midpoint in the second part and you cut it again, and then basically you keep dividing it in half and cutting it until you narrow it down to get as close as you can to a fault. And that's essentially what I did. But before I got to that point, I thought I'd do a basic check on my blocks, because if you've seen some of my previous videos, you'll know I use block detectors, which complicates the wiring quite a bit, unfortunately. So one of the reasons why it's difficult to use a simple continuity tester is that my layout is divided into a lot of blocks. So I've got these 8 ECOS block detectors wired up to different sections of the track. So if we look at this one here, what we've got is each detector needs a supply from the ECOS, which you can see at the top there, the blue and the yellow. Also each detector is connected to the ECOS via this control cable here. So you have a supply of the blue and the yellow, and then each of these purple wires goes to a different block, and you can probably just make out the numbers. I put numbers on all my blocks, so that's 1 to 4. and the one right at the bottom here goes up to 28, 25, 26, 27 and 28. So that's 28 blocks altogether. So the yellow is common. All the yellows go to the track common. That goes right around the track. It's unbroken, and each of these purple wires is a block, a separate isolated block, which have to be isolated by the insulated fish plates or a break in the track. So I disconnected everything, and what I did was I kept the yellow cable going into the main output of the ECOS, and I took the blue cable off. So what I did is I disconnected all of the supplies and all of the blocks from each of the detectors, and I took the blue wire from the ECOS itself and touched it to each of one of these. As you can see, these the screw terminals. I just touched the wire to the screw terminal, and if there was no short circuit, that's great. If there was a short circuit, it meant there was a problem with that block. So I actually went right through all 29 blocks. I've got 29 blocks at the moment. That's block 29 down there. I went through all 29 blocks and I actually discovered that I'd got 3 blocks wired up incorrectly. They were at cross purposes, which was a major problem. I also discovered, due to a faulty block, that when I put my new double slip in, I hadn't used an insulating fish plate, and this is something that Vintage 80s Loft Model Railway suggested. He'd done the same. He'd forgotten to put an insulated fish plate on a frog. Now with a double slip, you've got to put 4 insulated fish plates all the way around, so it's a separate, totally isolated piece of track. I forgot to do that, so that caused a block error. So although that fixed the block problems, it did not cure the ECOS. It was still showing a short circuit. That's when I had to use the suggestion from Minox 1217, Gary McPherson and Andy Gibson, and start dividing the layer in half, cut it physically, literally cut the wires, and see which half worked and which half didn't. If the first half was okay, then join them back together, then cut from the half to the end again, cut halfway between there, and see if that worked, etc, etc, just work my way down. So I cut the main bus in half first. So although it's blocks, and these are the block sections here, there are sections of the layout which aren't blocks, very small sections such as here. Because that's very small, that isn't the block, so that the yellow is common and the blue is just wired into the main bus as well. It doesn't go to one of the block detectors. So I cut the layout in half, and eventually worked out that the main bus was fine. There was nothing wrong with the main bus. So then I cut the point power supply bus, and then the ECOS was fine. So obviously one of the points was at fault. Joined it back together, cut it in half, found out that the first half was fine, it had a green light, but it was obviously the problem was in the second half. And methodically going through it like that, I discovered the problem was with this double slip here. So I disconnected the power and the frog to the point motor that looks after this half of the double slip, and then the ECOS reset fine, no problems at all. Plugged it back in, problem straight away. So it was obviously a problem with this point motor. I did check to make sure there's nothing shorting out on the track, just in case it was a track problem, and then I connected the wires to a spare point motor which I fortunately had lying around, and it was fine. The ECOS reset. So that was the problem. It was a faulty DCC Concepts point motor, and Len Mills also suggested breaking the fault finding into sections. He also said he had a problem with a DCC Concepts point motor with it having an internal short circuit, and that caused problems on his layout. So Len, thanks for that. I had exactly the same thing. As I said, I hope it's not something that's going to happen often. I hope a little bit more reliability. I know they do have a lifetime warranty, but removing a point motor from under a track is, especially in my type of layout, is very, very difficult. I'm sure it'll be covered by warranty, but it is difficult. It's a pain to remove. Never mind finding the problem in the first place, especially if you have a lot of them. But now I know. Might be able to zoom in next time if it does happen again. Touch wood, it doesn't. So one of the things I've been doing is I really like the track cams, or the local cams people use with mini cube cameras and stuff, and I've been wanting to try the same thing. but I wanted to take it a little bit further and see if I can get a little bit more movement into the track cam. So I've been working on something in the meantime, so see what you think.